Space Rogues 2. Big Ship, Lots of Guns. Written by John Wilker. Performed by Casey Johnston. Part 1, Chapter 1. Privateering. Okay, you know what? That was a lot of fun, Benny exclaims, a grin splitting his green face, entering the bridge of the Ghost. Behind him, Will and Zephyr follow, both exhibiting a little bounce in their step. Zephyr is also smiling broadly. Will drops into his command chair in the center of the room, running a hand through his light brown hair. Might be time for a haircut, he thinks. No argument there. Those idiots got in way over their heads, he says, tapping a few commands into the control on the arm of his chair. Between the reward and what we got from their hold, he pauses, looking down at the ship's account balance. We should be able to pay off the bounty the consortium put on our heads in no time. Benny cackles and in a mocking voice says, "The Xenoton pirates are known throughout this sector, blah, blah, blah." He drops to the ground, kneeling and crying out, "Don't hurt us! Please, mercy!" Then he doubles over, laughing. Zephyr takes her seat, bringing her own console to life.
I'll admit, getting a letter of marque from the Harrith government has proven to be less of a terrible idea than I first assumed. There is something satisfying in kicking pirate ass, as Will would say.
She reaches up and releases her hair from the ponytail she prefers to use when in combat. Will beams. So I was right. I'll take it. He leans back and puts his boots on the pilot station in front of him. Benny, what's up next? The small Braylac gets up from the floor and hurries to his console. He swipes the screen a few times. We've got a few options. There's a mining colony that's been harassed by pirates a few times, so they're asking for help. There's an agricultural settlement that's offering a pretty credit from a livestock transfer. There's a freighter convoy looking for some protection out in the Badlands, and a few other things on the network. A few more swipes. The livestock job actually has the highest guaranteed payout. The hatch to the bridge open and Maxim walks in. I've secured the last of the crates we took on. What's next? Before Will can answer, Zephyr does.
Livestock.
Without another word, Maxim turns and leaves the bridge.
I know what he means,
Zephyr says, looking from Benny to Will.
Livestock jobs suck.
Will nods. No argument here. Maybe that mining colony? Inclining her head.
Probably a good one. If it's pirates, we get to claim whatever is in their hold, plus fees.
She smiles.
And their ship, those always fetch a good price.
Nodding, Will says, Yeah, okay, Benny, take the mining gig. The Braylac nods. Roger that. A few types and then,
Okay, I'm sending the nav plot to your station. The colony is about 3 days from here, a small system called, well, it doesn't appear to have a name. Just a registration number, P3X-984. How poetic.
Will nods, he flips a few switches, and a low rumble begins to build from deep within the ship. Moments later, the Ghost is on its way. The station they had been docked at in orbit over the outermost planet in the Harrith system quickly recedes from view on the main screen. We can go to FTL in 20 minutes, he turns to Benny. Why don't you go down and set the table? We'll get dinner going as soon as we hit FTL, and if I recall, it's your turn.
It was my turn last night,
the small Braylac protests.
No, it wasn't. It was mine, and you know it,
Zephyr says from her station, then sticks her tongue out at him, while pulling one eyelid down with her finger. The small alien mutters something under his breath as he leaves the bridge. As the Ghost clears the station and the gravity well of the planet it's orbiting, the large FTL nacelles at the end of its wings power up. At the rear of each, a red glow begins to form, then with a flash the Ghost jumps to FTL. Will and Zephyr have worked in companionable silence, getting the ship ready for their next mission and filing the appropriate paperwork to close out their most recent adventure in privateering. The letter of marque might be lucrative, but the paperwork was monstrous. They stand to leave the bridge and join the others in the lounge. Before they reach the hatch, Zephyr turns to Will.
You know we can't keep this up forever, right?
Will sighs. I know, but that dickhead Zarix burned us good. The consortium still have its members, and their bounty hunters are out for our heads. And the only thing keeping them at bay, even a little, is the Harrith government and our arrangement with them. We leave this region of space and it's a free-for-all. Believe me, as soon as we have enough to pay the bounty, we'll pay it. He continues. Stealing Gabe from the gangster storage facility was still the right thing to do. Zephyr nods. This isn't the first time the two of them, she acting in her mostly official role as first officer, have had this conversation. When they had agreed to raid a secret space station for Zarix, they hadn't known that a Peacekeeper engineering bot would be aboard. It turned out that GBE 102002, Gabe, was carrying important data, proving that the Peacekeepers were conspiring to create a war in order to force several non-member systems to join the Galactic Commonwealth. The Ghost's decision to expose this plot had kicked off what GNO were now dubbing the Harrith incident, a shootout that had eventually involved several major systems, the Peacekeepers and the Rebels, and which was still having significant repercussions throughout the galaxy.
I know it was the right thing to do, Will, Zephyr says, and the crew does too. But that doesn't mean they're not getting restless. The other day I caught Benny hacking the voting system on Galatia. For the fun of it, he said. But I suspect he's taking on side work.
That little... Will starts, then takes a deep breath. Yeah, I can't blame him, I guess. Fucking Zarix. It's not our fault whatever deal he had set up for Gabe, and the data he contained fell apart.
It sort of is, she smiles.
Well, yeah, but it's not like we would have just walked away. I mean, I wanted to and all. He trails off, then resumes. You and Max's reputations and lives were on the line. Not to mention everyone back on Harrith. He shrugs. I wonder what he even had planned. It's not like what Gabe had was all that lucrative, outside of maybe the GC and Peacekeepers paying to keep a lid on it.
Don't underestimate how much they would have paid to do just that, she sighs. Well, just keep this in mind. Something is going to have to change sooner rather than later if you want to keep this crew together.
She turns and opens the hatch leading off the bridge. Newscast.
Good morning from GNO Stage 59 on R-Trax 3. I'm Monel Farash. The long-awaited closing arguments of the trial against the Galactic Commonwealth and the Peacekeepers has begun. It's been several months since this historic trial kicked off, following the incident at Harrith Prime that led to several member worlds of the Galactic Commonwealth filing a suit against the GC Governing Council as well as the top levels of Peacekeeper Command. The newscaster touches her large elephant-like ear, listening to someone. That's correct. This trial has moved so slowly due to the sheer number of witnesses called, and the time it has taken to assemble them, all while trying to ensure continuity of government here. It's been a long back and forth, and the outcome is still far from certain. But we'll all find out soon enough what the judges decide.
Dinner interrupted. In the crew lounge, the rest of the team is either lounging in one of the comfortable chairs in the center of the room or sitting to one side, at the small kitchen table set against the wall. Benny is puttering around the kitchenette area, singing something that sounds to Will oddly like Manic Monday by the Bangles. Gabe is the only one standing, his yellow optical sensor spinning and focusing. His smaller, fine manipulator arms are tucked up against his torso, where Will has noticed he keeps them to keep out of the way. In his seat nearby, Maxim has a bottle of Grum and is flipping through news feeds on the main room display. So, what's for dinner? Will asks, grabbing 2 more Grum from the fridge. He hands one to Zephyr before she walks over and takes a seat next to Maxim, her free hand finding his. Benny turns around, holding a large pan with something sizzling in it. Fried Melba fish. His face scrunches up. Wait, no, that's not it. Tallow fish, that's it. Zephyr, Will, and Maxim exchange a look from across the room. Maxim asks, What's a tallow fish? I picked some up on the Harrith Prime when we were there last. The merchant said it was a delicacy, something about the lake they live in, chemicals and such, somewhere in the northern reaches. He shrugs. After that, I kind of tuned him out until I paid. He raises a hand just as Will opens his mouth, but I had him send me a recipe with my receipt. This mollifies Will. At least with a recipe, Benny isn't winging it, which is usually when things go wrong in the kitchen, typically with fire involved, followed by intestinal distress from one or more of the members of the crew. Since the Harrith incident, as Giano has dubbed it, the crew have enjoyed a reasonably comfortable life as privateers for the government of Harrith. The battle had severely reduced the size and power of the Harrith fleet, and the Quillant and Zangar fleets had suffered similarly. As a result, piracy and general lawlessness became the order of the day in the Harrith system and its outlying territories, as well as several smaller systems nearby. Opportunists from all over the quadrant had started setting up shop, raiding small colonies, attacking shipping routes, and more. That was when the governments of the major systems in the region began offering letters of marque to any ship that could show sufficient firepower to act in that system's interests. The Ghost was more than suited for this type of work, and the work itself resonated with the crew. For the last 7 standard months, the Ghost had been crisscrossing the sectors of space around the Harrith system, protecting trade convoys and ore shipments, and even occasionally running freight when the load and payout is right. All told, there are several hundred small to mid-sized ships roaming the area, acting for one government or another. While law and order are not fully restored, the last few months have seen a drastic decrease in overall crime in the area. According to the local news outlets, it'll be several cycles before any of the major powers get back to full military strength. Despite the losses, Harrith and its unaffiliated neighbors have flat out refused the aid of the Galactic Commonwealth. Luckily, all that balances out the other issue facing the crew. After the Harrith incident and their theft of Gabe from the secret space station, the consortium that owned the station had somehow been clued in as to why they had been robbed and who set the job up. Zarax had one shot to escape the blame and quickly took it, burning Will and the crew of the Ghost without a second thought. Bounty hunters from all over the quadrant were now looking for the Ghost, and while it was no secret where they were, the Harrith government and Navy had made it clear that the Ghost was still quite popular and would remain wholly protected while in the service to the people of Harrith Prime. Will watches Gabe, who has moved to the kitchenette to talk to Benny. The 2-meter-high android deploys his smaller arms and begins taking dishes and returning them to their storage cabinets. He finishes the task quickly, forearms helps. He has a washcloth draped over his left primary arm. Suddenly, Gabe pauses. Captain, we're receiving a distress call wideband. Everyone else immediately stops what they're doing. Will gets up and heads to the bridge, Zephyr and Maxim on his heels. As they go, Gabe offers, I've instructed the ship to alter course. The hatch out of the common space closes. Benny looks up at his mechanical friend. Guess we're cleaning the table, he says. Gabe picks up the tray with the fish on it. It would appear so. Is tallow fish good reheated? Crime doesn't pay. As Will approaches the bridge, the hatch opens automatically. The main screen is already displaying a tactical plot showing the source of the distress call and the Ghost's relative position and speed. Taking his seat at the dual command and pilot station, he announces, We're on course. Zephyr and Maxim quickly take their places. Zephyr taps out a few commands and is murmuring into the mic at her station, likely talking to the source of the distress call, Will assumes. She looks over at him and nods, and the overhead speakers come to life. Please repeat last, she says louder than before. This is Freighter Sartomo. We're under attack. There are 3 freighters in our convoy. We're under attack. Help us! Will tilts his head up slightly, a habit he's never been able to shake, despite it being completely unnecessary, as the computer will pick up his voice no matter what he does with his head. This is Captain Will Calder of the Ghost. We're on our way, but we're... He looks over to Zephyr, who shows the count by flashing both hands 4 times. Luckily, Pelorians have 5 fingers, or more accurately, 3 fingers and 2 thumbs. 40 syntax out. Can you hold them off? Static fills the speakers momentarily. I think so. All 3 of us have defenses, but we won't last long. Please hurry. We're on our way, I promise. Just hang in there. There's a soft beep indicating that the channel is closed. Will taps on an icon set into the arm of his chair and says quickly, Gabe, are you in engineering? I need more speed. Ramp up the reactor to 120.
I am, Captain, the droid's voice informs him. But the reactor and the engines will not be able to sustain that power level for long.
They only need to last less than 40 centox. Do it.
The ship shudders, and even with the inertia compensators, everyone feels a slight lurch and pressure pushing them back against their seats. Acknowledged, says Gabe's voice. There is another soft beep and the channel closes. Zephyr looks up from her station. New ETA. 25 centox.
Will nods. Max, get ready. I'll drop us out of FTL as close to on top of them as I can. You'll have to lock on and open fire as fast as you can. Z? Did the captain of the Sartomo say how many attackers there were?
She nods. Yes, 4.
Will whistles. Tough odds. For them. He grins at Maxim, who grins back. The next 20-odd minutes drag on, everyone waiting tensely in their seats. At 15 minutes out, the long-range sensors are able to start telling them what's going on up ahead. 2, not 3 icons representing freighters are clustered together, with 3 red triangles orbiting them, occasionally swooping in close, then back out again. Looks like the situation has changed quite a bit, Will thinks. He assumes that one of the freighters is out of commission, either destroyed or at least disabled enough to not register on the long-range scopes. From the overhead speakers, Gabe's voice comes again. Captain, the heat shielding on the reactor is becoming unstable. We have, at most, 5 more centox before I have to bring the reactor back down to below 100%, ideally closer to 80%. Beyond that, the reactor will scram, and we will be on emergency power. The level of detail is, as usual, perfect. Gabe takes his role as ship's engineer seriously and Will appreciates it. Acknowledged. Push it as far as you can, as long as you can, then dial it back. Just remember, we're going into combat, so we're going to need more, not less power. There is what sounds like a sigh. Very well. A soft beep as the connection closed. Benny, who had joined them on the bridge midway during the flight towards the battle, finally chimes in. I'm picking up narrow band comms, likely the pirates talking to each other. They're encrypted, of course. Will turns to the station Benny has called home for almost a year. Can you crack them? Of course I can. But do we care what they're saying? It'll be easier to just jam their comms. He rubs his small hands together. Fine, do that. I really don't care as long as they're off balance. Will taps a few controls, and the display switches to the view directly ahead of the ship, currently the stretched-out stars of FTL travel. 2 minutes. Z, hail the Sartomo. She nods and taps a few things on her console, then nods again. Will speaks loudly toward the ceiling. Hang in there. We're here. He motions to her with a slashing gesture of his hand, and hears the soft beep of a closed comms channel. A slight lurch forward tells them that Gabe has reduced the power output of the main reactor significantly. A minute later, Will slides the FTL control back to sublight, and the Ghost is immediately in the middle of the fray. Directly ahead and to port are the 2 remaining freighters, one venting drive plasma from a wound near its main engines. Slightly further ahead and to starboard are 2 of the 3 attackers. They're small combat craft, about half as big as the Ghost, but well armed. Cutter class at best, Will decides. Likely a crew of 2 or 3, the rest of the ship probably just cargo hold and engines. Maxim unleashes the forward weapons on the 2 craft. The turrets below and beside the bridge roar to life. Will nods to Zephyr. Hail them. On the screen in front of them, the plasma cannons mounted on the main engine pods stream lethal bolts of energy at the furthest pirate, while the forward weapons mounted under the forward section of the ship spit almost equally deadly fire at the nearest pirate. Zephyr nods back. Attacking craft, she says, her voice all business despite the battle raging outside. This is your only warning. Power down your engines and weapons, or be destroyed. Then there is the familiar soft beep telling Will the channel has been closed. Benny, Zephyr asks. Their comms are jammed. If they want to talk to each other, they'll have to do it in the open. Until they settle on a new frequency, and they agree to it, which we'd hear, and I could jam them again. He grins. A pair of missiles streak out from the launchers on the Ghost's underside. They fly from the bottom of the view screen, splitting up and heading towards two of the pirates. The two attackers directly ahead explode. Maxim is grinning from ear to ear. "Well done, Max," Will shouts. The past. "Well, as jobs go, that one sucked," Will says, plopping down in the command chair on the bridge. From the hold comes a screeching moo-type sound and Will winces. "Computer, is there a way to dampen the sound from the cargo hold?"
Negative.
The infuriatingly calm male voice replies. "Shit." He pulls up the pre-flight checklist and starts getting ready to leave whatever this planet is called. "Computer, open a channel to Zarx." A soft beep announces the channel is open. A few seconds later comes a familiar raspy voice.
You have them?
"Yeah, I got 'em, whatever the hell they are."
They're expensive, that's what they are. You don't need to know more. How soon can you be here?
Will looks at his console. 8 hours, long ticks. No, 8 talks. Yeah, talks. There's a loud hissing sound.
Fine.
The soft beep announces the connection is closed. "Asshole," Will says. The Ghost lifts off the planet and accelerates out of the atmosphere. Its powerful atmospheric engines roar, pushing it away from the planet. The smuggler that met Will with the creatures covers his face and swears. Once the ship's course is underway, Will heads back to the hold. As soon as the personal hatch opens, he's assaulted by a smell so bad he makes a gagging sound and almost pukes. The creatures below look up and let out a screeching moo sound. He shudders and walks down to the hold. Whatever these things are called, they're ugly. 6 stubby legs sprouting from a tubby tube-shaped body, covered in slightly sticky leathery skin. 3 tails swishing back and forth lazily. To Will, the worst thing about them is their faces. 4 beady eyes set wide apart on a big, flat skull, above a completely toothless smile. Will pushes through the shuffling animals to the port side of the hold, where he grabs some of the feed Zarex's henchmen gave him. He scoops it up and tosses it to the floor. The salamander cows, as Will has decided to call them, shuffles around. Long, prehensile tongues loll out and writhe on the floor looking for the pellets. "That's disgusting," Will shouts, edging back to the hatch while trying to avoid salamander cow saliva. He shuts the hatch and heads back to the lounge with a shudder. Will drops into one of the large chairs in the crew lounge, a grum in one hand, something like beef jerky in the other. "Computer, update on search routine. Find Will's friends." He looks at the ceiling, waiting.
No results.
"Really?"
No humans have been reported within the sphere of Galactic Commonwealth.
"Man, why hasn't someone kidnapped anyone else from Earth? How can I be the only one?"
Unable to answer.
Will imagines a smug, beach-tanned face smirking. "Shut up." With 6 hours to go, he looks around the lounge. "Mr. Sulu, are we still on course?" He nods slowly a few times. "Good, good." He looks over to the couch thing, also empty. "Commander Worf, weapon status?" More nodding, then Will sighs and says, "Good. Hope we won't need weapons to transport salamander cows."